Hi, my name is Alexa, and I'll be talking about American theater, but more specifically, American musical theater. You may have heard people rave about certain musicals like Kinky Boots, Wicked, Rent, Fun Home, On Your Feet, or even The Color Purple. People talk about how amazing these shows are and tell you you have to go see it and experience what I experienced and what I felt when I saw it. And one thing that all these shows that people are raving about have in common, even though they're so diverse and different and have different subject matters, is that they all did not and do not have a solid place in the Great White Way. This speech will discuss how minorities have been excluded and misrepresented in Broadway. So, what is American theater? More specifically, what is American musical theater? According to Nathan Hurwitz, the author of American Musical Theater, There's No Place Like It. An American musical theater is a combination of theatrical performance styles. So some of these styles include ballad opera, burlesque, and vaudeville. So burlesque is a type of theater style that's dancing and it's very seductive, and there's even strip teases that are involved in burlesque. Vaudeville is kind of like a variety show and there's different acts going on. The combination of all these different theater styles have made American theater the unique, influential entity that is today, and it's a great experience. So, what is Broadway exactly? So, Merriam-Webster defines Broadway as a street in New York that houses many playhouses that are located in the area between the Avenue of the Americas and 9th Street, and also from West 41st Street to West 53rd Street. Broadway is so popular and is used as a term for like just theater in general because that's where the playhouses are, and because people connect to the stories being told, they connect to the characters, because theater is very reflective and mirrors real life, and they see the experiences they've gone through in the past and now in theater. Another name for theater is the Great White Way, and I mentioned it earlier, so we're going to go into more detail about what the Great White Way is. So not only is it a nickname, but it derives from Broadway being the first electrically lit street in the United States, and it's nearly a mile of illumination, and this illumination and it being the first electrically lit street happened in 1880. But there's also another connotation to the Great White Way, and that is that theater is a white male dominated field, and minorities have been depicted in very stereotypical ways and have been very misrepresented or even excluded and not discussed at all. So some minorities that have been excluded from American musical theater are Hispanics, women, African Americans, gays, and lesbians. So for gays and lesbians, R. Schumann stated that before the 1960s, when the first openly gay play called The Boys in the Band happened, homosexuality as a subject matter was banned in theater. And it took a very long time for that to be lifted, the ban to be lifted, and for people to be more open and accepting of the idea of gays and lesbians being represented in theater. Jorge Huerta talks about how long it took for Chicano theater to be represented in mainstream musical theater, more specifically on Broadway. But when these shows that mainstream producers were interested in were produced on Broadway, they took out elements of the play that made it what it was, that represented Chicano theater and Mexican Americans. So they were being misrepresented because how they represented themselves was changed. Harvey Young, the author of the Oxford Companion to African American Theater, talks about ways that African Americans were stereotyped in theater. And usually they were either Mammy caricature or Jezebel. And so the Mammy caricature depicted black women as loud, unattractive. They were either nannies or maids, and it just wasn't, they weren't depicted in a very good way. As well as the Jezebel caricature, it depicted black women as seductive and promiscuous. And so women were also being misrepresented. And so women were depicted as stay-at-home moms, the girl next door, or they didn't have very large roles in theater. And in the roles that they did have, didn't show any depth, or that women had different personalities and that they weren't just this one thing. So I've talked about different groups who have been excluded in theater and how there's more progress that needs to be made. There have been advancements in all of these different minority groups, and some of the plays that I talked about earlier, like Kinky Boots and Wicked, The Color Purple, they're all depicting and mirroring women, African Americans, lesbians, fun home, and all the minority groups in a way that they see themselves instead of how people who aren't in minority groups see them. So thank you for listening, and I hope you learned about minority groups and how they were misrepresented. Good night.